those of you who are RSVP'd, you should have an email. And in that email is the run of show for today. At the very bottom of that email, there's a link to the Songrise Movement link tree. I'm going to be referring to links in that link tree a couple of times today, but there's song books in there and things that are going to help us to bring more song into the action spaces that we have coming up. So yeah, it's very exciting. I hope that you will use that resource plenty. I also want to start today with a land acknowledgement for Tacoma Park, which sits on the ancestral homelands of the Nacotchtank, Tuxanant, and Piscataway peoples, and indigenous people make their homes here today. We acknowledge the painful history and forced removal from this territory and celebrate active work of descendants to preserve and nourish their indigenous identity. I'd also like to take a moment to further acknowledge the unpaid labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants, whose exploitation was pivotal to the rapid economic growth of our nation and who face ongoing oppression today. We continue the fight of working people against those who hoard wealth instead of share it. In this space, we are committing to political action that holds governing structures accountable for systemic racism and ends oppression in all forms. I also want to acknowledge that we are using bucket drums, and bucket drums are, in DC, there's a rich history of busking, which is primarily a craft done by oppressed people who don't have access to drums, and who are incredibly super skilled, and they have been disenfranchised in Washington, D.C. They've been removed from the busking spaces, and I think that we can all acknowledge that D.C. is less culturally rich when we don't have buskers out there making life more fun when you're walking by. So I want to acknowledge that and the Black folks who've been oppressed by Washington, D.C.